Operation Pizza Roll started in March in 2017, and it mainly started because the New York Times wanted to make sure that they got a hot read, because you can catch a cold read on a psychic pretty easily, and I've done it many, many times. Hot reads are really difficult to prove.
Psychics often claim that they can read people's minds, predict the future, or tap into the spirit world and communicate with the dead. It's a hugely profitable industry. But to convince people that they have access to special information, they rely on one of two methods. Cold reading, which is where you read the sitter cold, relying on verbal and nonverbal clues to glean information from them, sort of like Sherlock Holmes. And hot reading, which is where the psychics research the sitter ahead of time using tools like social media, and either memorizes the details or has someone communicate it via an earpiece. I've done entire videos on the methods of both tactics, and we'll put links to them below.
You can't just stand up in a psychic show and say, "You're a fraud, you're phony." Does nothing. You cause a disturbance and you're thrown out. And that's it.
Thomas John is a world-renowned psychic whose clientele includes Jennifer Lopez, Julianne Moore, and Courtney Cox.
And a friend of mine in the LA area, she said, "Hey, this psychic just came across my Facebook feed. He's going to be in Hollywood in 2 weeks. You want to try to do something with this guy?" And I'm like, sure. I'd never heard of him before.
People will ask, do you ever have naysayers or skeptics? I mean, I do probably in the world, but those people really don't come to see me because they wouldn't, they're not going to come.
Right. He just happened to be the one that we got because he was in the right place at the right time, but I knew nothing about him beforehand.
I'm just more aware of somebody's energy, people around them, their aura, things like that.
When we decided that we were going to do Thomas John, we said, all right, who wants to be in the team? I just threw that out on Facebook, and several people said, I do. I couldn't tell him who I was doing. I just told him it was a psychic. I said it's going to take about 2 weeks. We're going to be lying to the psychic. We're going to give the psychic money, and it may possibly cause people in the audience to believe further. Because when we go to the event, we're not going to reveal ourselves as being skeptics. We're just going to look like one of the crowd and agree to everything that the psychic says. So I told the team, I said, if you're not okay with that, then you need to not be in my team.
And of course, everybody who got involved with it really went out of their way to make these pages real.
So I explained, you're going to create these pages and you're going to interact with each other for about 10 days. And during that 10 days, you're going to create a lot of different characters. 2 of the characters are going to go to the psychic event. One is going to be myself, and one of them is going to be Mark Edward. I said, you are going to create a backstory that I won't know anything about, and Mark won't know anything about. And then you just look like you're real people talking to each other.
The idea was to try and have something that was bulletproof, because a psychic could say, maybe I was just reading their mind, what they were thinking. I've worked with psychics for long enough to know they have an answer for everything. And unless you can choke them with their own bait, you're not going to get anywhere. So what we had to do is double blind it by making sure that some of the information that was put on the Facebook pages, Susan and I didn't know. So when we went to the show, we were only given a very limited amount of facts.
They put together a backstory for myself and for Mark. And they said that I'm Susanna Wilson, and I'm going to attend this event with my husband, Mark Wilson. I want to contact my dead twin brother, Andy, who died of pancreatic cancer a couple years before. And then Mark's story, they created saying that Mark didn't have a great relationship with his dad, and years ago his father had died of heart problems. And now Mark's about the age his dad was at the time that he started having heart problems. So Mark's been really thinking about it a lot and having some tests done. So he wants to be in contact with his dad, and he's stressed out about these tests he's had. So we're only told that little bit of information.
The rest of it was filled out by dozens of details and photographs and pictures of cats and dogs. The idea was if the psychic took that bait, then that would show conclusively that they used a Facebook, because we didn't even know what he was talking about.
Now, we didn't know if Thomas John was going to hot read us or cold read us or ignore us. We didn't know. Mark is a very non-military kind of person. He's kind of a hippie.
I wore on my lapel, a Marine pin, right? Because sometimes it's cool to add a little extra bait on top of it, a little bacon on the hamburger, you know?
I'm, born and bred in America, and my relatives are from Slovenia. So I wore a thistle pin from Scotland on my jacket. So the idea was if he was going to cold read us, he would probably pick up on Mark being a military person, and that I would probably have a lot of ancestors in Scotland, because obviously I don't have a Scottish accent.
We got the ticket. 2 tickets, and we decided we were going to be husband and wife.
Oh, we wore wedding rings too, like we were married to each other, which we're not.
We each had a tissue so that we could dab our eyes, from time to time and twist it nervously.
I purchased the VIP tickets, so we're in the very front of the audience. There's maybe 50 people in the room, and we're sitting in the 3rd row.
We walked in, we got in the 3rd row, and the host comes out and says, "Oh, by the way, feel free to record this whole show." And we're like, okay.
Thomas John comes out onto the stage holding a microphone, and he stayed in that position for 2 hours.
Usually I will close my eyes. I might go into a little bit of what I would call like a trance.
And he would close his eyes most of the time, like he's really concentrating on hearing something.
In the first 10 minutes, he had nothing but solid hits, which to me as a mentalist, I was like, something ain't right here. I kept looking at Susan like he was just nailing stuff. It was too much. You're like looking at this guy and you're saying, if he could do this, why doesn't he go to the racetrack? Or why doesn't he buy lotto numbers? Why does he have to stand up here at 8 o'clock on Friday night and do this? Just basic logic, right?
It was so spot on that we were really like, uh-huh. And Mark's like, yeah, that's a little too accurate.
But we later found out that the woman who he was so accurate with behind us had already had a reading from him. She came up to us after the show and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad he was able to reach through to your brother and your father. I was much happier than the last time I was in his show. He didn't get anything." So it's really hard for us not to say, but don't you, we have to stay in character. So we said, yeah, that's really tough. So you've seen him before? Oh, yes, he knows all about me. So remember, the rest of the audience does not know that. These people are so bereaved and so in shock, they won't say, wait a minute, you already told me that the last time, I was starting to look around the room a little bit, but I didn't want to look too suspicious. And there was a woman sitting across the aisle from me who was dabbing at her eyes. And I leaned forward and looked at her. She wasn't really crying. She was doing the same thing we were. So I knew that sooner rather than later, he was going to get over to her and they had something set up. So she was a plant, right? But see, the average sitter, the person who goes into these things, they don't think of that.
And she got a reading that was accurate, really, really accurate. And she's crying with the tissue. And Mark nudges me, he says, she's not crying. And we're like, okay. Then Thomas says, I'm getting a brother who wants to reach out to his twin. I tentatively raised my hand. I'm really nervous.
Who's Andy?
That's my brother.
That's your brother. I feel like you and Andy, you always kind of share this energy between you where you could kind of hear each other's thoughts and things like that.
And I'm dabbing at my eyes and pretending I'm crying, and Mark's fanning me with paper because I'm supposedly really hot and just really nervous.
Somebody's making me aware of cancer. Is this your brother? Did he have cancer? And I get in here, which to me would show me stomach or pancreas. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay.
Then he starts telling me about things that I have no knowledge of whatsoever. Who's Maria? Who's Buddy?
He's bringing this up, and he brought it up 3 times, and he's like, Maria. Do you know who that is? Because he's bringing up Maria. And Buddy? Who's that?
We don't know what's on those Facebook pages. We just know that we're trying to agree with him on everything he says.
And that became a little interesting because we had to sit there and say, yes, and we didn't know what he was talking about.
So your dog is here. Must be your dog because there's a dog here.
And then he goes to Mark.
Your dad passed from heart problems. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I don't want to scare you, but have you had your heart checked?
And he talks to Mark about heart disease and how he had some tests done and he's really worried about the tests and how there was a lot of distance between him and his father.
I do know that I can tell you with your dad, because this is what he's telling me. He wants to take ownership for the fact that he was pretty hard on you growing up.
which is what we knew. And then he goes into other things like, who is Steve?
There's a gentleman in spirit coming through, Steve.
Who quit smoking?
Did he quit smoking?
Yes. Mark and I just had to kind of just go with it.
Is that true? Did he smoke and then quit?
Several
No,
times.
your brother, the twin.
Oh, my brother?
Yes.
My brother did too.
Well, both of ours did.
No, but I think it's your twin. Did he quit smoking?
Yes.
Okay, so he quit smoking.
I thought it went really well. We were absolutely overjoyed when we compared the screenshots of because what we did is we got a transcript from the audio, and we compared the screenshots of the Facebook pages with the transcripts from the audio. They're mirror images.
So one of the things Thomas John asked me was about Michigan.
Is there a connection at all to Michigan?
When I asked the pizza rollers, what's this with Michigan? They didn't know what I was talking about. And so one of the people in the group said, wait a minute. And she went to one of those filler pictures that they had just inserted, and it was for Cornwall Park. It's someplace in the UK. So we Googled the park name, the Cornwall Park, and it comes up to a park in Michigan. He says, who was smoking, and quit?
Somebody's talking about they were smoker, and they quit. I think it's your brother.
I asked the pizza rollers about that also, and they said, well, I don't know. Nobody put anything about smoking. And then they scrolled, and they saw that Andy, the account they were using as my brother's account, if you look far enough back, there's a screenshot where he had put one of those life events, and he put quit smoking back in 2013. 15 people or so went into this back room to meet Thomas John, and he goes up to one woman and he takes a book from her, and it's the woman in green, the woman that he had given the reading to earlier that was perfect. And he takes the book and he gets his pen, and she looks up and she says, spell it right this time. Really? Spell it right this time? And he said, okay. And he just kind of signed her book and handed it back. And everybody else in the room, he had to ask them their names.
We thought that was a little odd. And then Susan asked him, Susan says,
are there any other mediums that you have endorsed over the years? The people that you really look up to, your people that you think do a fabulous job? And he said, well, there's this medium and that medium, and their names I've never heard of. And then he said, some of my students have also showed great promise. And I said, oh, you have students? And he said,
one of my students is here in the room. That's her right here. And he points to the woman in green.
The person you gave a reading to in the audience was one of your students. How very interesting,
So we're like, yeah, he is training her and doing a pretty good job of it too, right? And we're looking around the room to see if anybody else noticed that. But why would they, right? They're all fawning over him like, oh, we think you're so great, but we're just going, oh man, he just called out his own stooge right in front of us.
2019 will definitely be a year of, this is the year really of manifestation.
I mean, it's really fun to play the game of these charlatans, to beat them at their own game, or at least try to beat them, because we both know it's a world of lies and we have to start somewhere. I'm a magician and a mentalist, and I appreciate the artifice of what these guys do, but I can't stand the way that it tears people up. How disgusting can it be when a psychic says that someone's missing child is murdered and will never be found, and they turn up alive in Chicago? It's just, it's wrong. And, for the people who give them platforms like the daytime TV shows, they are partly responsible.
After Operation Pizza Roll, the New York Times wanted to run the story, but the columnist for the expose asked if he could trail along to another sting operation with a different psychic first. That became what would later be called Operation Peach Pit, and they were joined by the paranormal investigator and skeptic Kenny Biddle. Between the two operations, Thomas John was given his own TV show on Lifetime called The Seatbelt Psychic, where he would pick up alleged strangers in a rideshare and give them both a lift and a reading. And his accuracy seems pretty impressive at first, but after a bit of investigation, Susan discovered that the sitters being read were actually paid actors for the company that produced the show. She has an entire article about her findings, and I'll link to it in the description below. To anyone thinking that psychics are all just fun and games, they most certainly are not. and have conned people out of their life savings, wasted police resources, and cost others their mental health and sometimes even their lives. I have a whole video on what the harm is, and I'll link to it below. If you have a friend or family member who's fallen prey to one of these grief vampires, I have an entire series on my channel exposing psychics and the tricks that they use. Feel free to share it with people and call out these psychic vultures wherever you see them. Don't let them get away with this. I'm also going to put links below to Susan's articles, the New York Times story, and the full audio recordings for Operation Pizza Roll. And if you appreciate this video and the work that I do promoting skepticism and critical thinking, you can support my work on a per episode basis at patreon.com/holykoolaid. Lastly, after the Times article, Thomas John responded to the allegations in a live Facebook stream. So it's only fair that I give him the final word. Dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid.
I didn't go on anybody's Facebook profile. I would never do that. I'm not interested in doing that. I don't have the time to do that. It has nothing to do with anything. It's like the stupidest stuff. I mean, seriously.